This
Everyone,
conference will now be recorded.
we're recording for anybody who doesn't know. And we post these on our website for later, so it's always great if you have questions. Please feel free and just go through the technical stuff. If you have issues right now, I have everyone muted just for the feedback on the line. Pop up in the chat box. Pop up in the chat box if you have a question. Dan will, at the end of each section, he will certainly ask you if you have any questions. We do appreciate feedback. And we'll get started for today. I appreciate everyone for attending. It's audit discussion today, and Dan Moody is the auditor here at the Office of Public Instruction. If you haven't met or talked to him, don't be offended, or don't be offended if you have either. We're here to help. Dan's been a great addition to the team. He's been at OPI over a year now, right? Yeah. So I guess he's here for the long term, which is good. And I will turn it over to Dan, or I will turn it over and let.
I do talking.
Yep. So Dan, go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Dan Moody, and thank you for participating. Many of you I have met. I have a list of everybody that expressed interest, and I'm really happy to see that there's a lot of participation from the mid-tier schools, the state audits and reviews, because a lot of this applies more to them than the large schools with multiple people on their staff. As Kara said, I've been here about a year and a half. I'm the nice auditor, as you all can attest to. And I review all the audit reports for the school districts. I developed the risk assessment, and today we'll be discussing the following topics there. I can hear you.
You don't need to raise that.
Okay. So the topics for today, we're gonna review all the statutes. We're gonna grind through the first 4 or 5 slides, reviewing the statutes that gives us the legal authority for audits and the financial thresholds for the type of audits required. I'd like to review the training resources and information updates and where to find them. Then we're going to look at 7 standard internal controls and how they can help mitigate the inherent risks for school districts with limited personnel and resources. We'll review the risk assessment process, which now includes state audits. We'll look at the most predominant audit findings for fiscal year 2017 and how best to implement the internal controls discussed to prevent these findings going forward, and then the best practices when responding to your audit findings. Next slide. Okay. This is the legal underpinning of why we have audits, the deadlines for reporting and the requirements for those audits. Legislature's in session, but it's not expected that they'll change these, and if they did, it would be unlikely that it would be reflected in the current year. Next slide. Okay, these are the internet addresses for local government services. The first link is the official site for LGS, which is part of Department of Administration, where you can go to see audit and financial review resources. Much of this your auditors use. They also have the listing for all the approved auditors for school audits and also the auditors that are authorized to do forensic audits. Hopefully none of you will need a forensic audit. You can also drill down and get your compliance supplements for the schools. As you know, your audits are filed on the online portal for LGS, and we do collaborate with local government services to a point. And the example that probably most of you have seen is that we have to affirm that we've received and accepted the school district's responses to the district's audit finding. This is date sensitive for them, and if I don't do that, you'll be receiving nasty letters that you did not send in response to your audit findings. After I do this, the school district will receive a letter saying that OPI has accepted your audit finding responses. Please read the entire letter. Due to our insistence, there are paragraphs there that says OPI has recently notified us that they have reviewed your proposed corrective action plans and accepted those plans pending implementation of corrective measures. Please be aware, however, that OPI's acceptance of your plans does not affect OPI's risk assessment process. Both LGS and OPI may engage in further monitoring of your corrective actions, including but not limited to requests for documentation to ensure that your corrective actions are implemented. I don't know if Elaine from Power is on, but when I asked her for some more information, she pointed out that she'd already received all these letters. I have to look at what is actually done, not what was proposed. So please, I really appreciate everybody's patience that they do that. Next slide. Okay. Backwards. These are the thresholds for your audits. Determining what type of audit you're required to have depending on your expenditures and revenues. We make this calculation based on your financial reporting to us. We then pass this on to LGS, where OPI pays a calculated amount for each type of audit. Next slide. Okay, if you go into our main site, there's various resources for you there. And in addition to these on the slide, there are also multiple other resources. There are aids for accounting, such as miscellaneous fund tracking sheet, guidance for new accounting pronouncements. I know I just put one out there the other day. Spreadsheets to help you reconcile your cash to the county treasurer. A spreadsheet to assist you for segregation of duties. And we also have the Maslow guide for extracurricular accounting. This brings us to the next slide. And these are the findings these are the most significant findings from the most recent year. Top 4 being extracurricular accounting, cash-related findings and reconciliations, statements, preparation of financial statements, and segregation of duties are also there. Later, we will talk about the review of all the audits and the risk assessment that I do on all schools. For now, I just want you to know, when we do the assessment, I discount that the preparation of financial statements. And do not include it on your risk assessment because sometimes you just don't have the resources or the people. This is the same that I also do for segregation of duties. You can see there's some 41 findings. I think Felicia Smith from Joliet's out there somewhere. And I was looking at her most recent audit, and she had 2 findings: preparation of financial statements and inadequate segregation of duties. And it's hats off to her that there were no other findings. I think there are some auditors that no matter what you do, that you're going to get this finding. So just while it's so very important and we're going to talk about it in depth, I do discount that too. This brings us to our next slide. These are 7 standard internal controls that they actually come from the Certified Internal Auditor exam. So what I want to do is review these, and if you have any comments in any way, any experiences or anything that you're doing, please let us know. Next slide. Okay, segregation of duties. As I said, the most repeated finding was student activity accounting. So often, this is because there is not segregation. Having 2 people count receipts, one approving and another preparing a deposit, reviewing reconciliations, purchases, expenditures. Even though you might have very limited resources, we must always look for ways to segregate significant transactions whenever we can. For smaller schools, the superintendent and the school board need to be included. I think David Pafford from Knoxon, are you out there? He's a school board member, and it's really good to see you.
Yes, this is David, yes.
It's really good to see you here because the schools where you have a business manager or clerk and that's it, the participation of school board trustees is so very important. So, you know, and we can help you any way you might want to, rather suggestions, whatever.
Okay, yep, thank you very much.
Now, for some of the clerks and stuff, your school board members or your superintendent might not be, might need to be trained up a little bit for what they do need to look for. So you need to know that. Access controls, is not just your computer access, but your payroll information and any student records that are sensitive. There have been a couple of findings related to this too. Now, physical audits. This is mainly just going back and checking. I know some of you have payroll findings. Linda from Centerville did. And if you just go back before your audits and review five personnel files, make sure everything's included in there. This would also be a thing that school board members or the superintendent just periodically go check. Look for all the approval signatures, cutoff reviews for both revenue and expenditures. You take your last 5 and at the end of the fiscal year and your first 5 of the next year, that is all that the auditors do to check your cutoff. As I said, these are standard internal controls come from the Certified Internal Auditor exam, and what I'm suggesting is if it works for you and the clerks and managers, kind of become your own internal auditors and review your stuff to make sure it is complete. Each problem or discrepancy you find improves your accounting and reporting, and it can also prevent audit findings. Next slide. Am I okay? Okay, the next one, standardized documentation. I'm actually audited by the legislative auditors. So I write out the procedures that I follow from the moment I receive an audit to when I actually finish the risk assessment. When I send emails asking for information about your findings, I put your responses in your file, and it documents that I actually followed up. Some important reasons for writing your procedures and having your board approve them is it increases transparency. It allows your board to understand what you're doing and the importance of it. And it helps so much with succession. I've seen several times where the district clerk retires after a very long time there, who probably has remembered every procedure that she's been doing for the last 20 years, and a new clerk comes in, and the next audit report has a lot of problems. Documentation of what you're doing, your policies and procedures, would help a lot to solve that problem with new people. I understand you're all very, very busy, but if you'll write out checklists for year ends, I've been a controller. And we had checklists for monthly, quarterly, and year-end to make sure everything's complete. The next thing is trial balances. And this is something board members could also do. If you look from prior years, significant changes from prior periods, you should always check into them. You're also going to see any negative fund balances, which is also a fairly significant audit finding. For student activity funds, your revenues and expenditures shouldn't be significantly different from year to year. So if you review your trial balances, you should be able to see that. I think it's really important that your student activity funds are looked at that. In the last 2 years, there have been 3 or 4 times where irregularities, quote unquote, have been found by the outside auditors. It's always best to find them yourself. Periodic reconciliations, that's the second most common finding. periodic's probably the wrong term. They should be regular and monthly. And for cash accounts, that is required by administrative rules of Montana. Some basic things is always reconciling your accounting system to your TFS. I see findings that way, where your underlying accounting system is not reconciling. And your cash on your books to the county treasurer should always be reconciled. If there is a problem and you don't fix it, it just gets harder and harder to find. Now, having said that, I also know there have been some instances recently where the problem is the county treasurer. And then you'll get the finding that's happened in a few counties here. All you can do is do the very best you can and document what you have done. The last is approval authority. Significant transactions should always be signed off by another person, the superintendent or a school board member. Now this should be documented, the hierarchy of approval, and it should be approved by your board. I understand that one side does not fit all, but these are standard internal controls, so I hope you will try to adapt to your particular situation. I do receive audits that have just the segregation of duties and preparation of financial statements, and that's it. And I think that shows that they're doing the reconciliations and all of the other controls, and have mitigated just the inherent risk of being a small school with one person doing all the work. I think you do what's possible with what you have. Now let's turn to the risk assessment that is done annually. OPI is the pass-through agency for federal funding, is required to review audits and assess the risk. Because we deal with the federal dollars, this is why we're now doing these risk assessments. And as I've said, we've now included state audits in the risk assessment, which is the majority of the people there. These are my processes to do this, so rather than read it to you, this is what I do when I do the risk assessment. They come in, I enter them into a spreadsheet, which you'll see soon. Oops. Go ahead and get that. Next one. The point I think with this is I'll enter everything into the spreadsheet. I'll review the audits. I'll see what the ones that I believe that need to either be put on watch status or high risk. And then I review them with two different times, with a committee from the finance department, and the second time with the superintendent. We're very careful about, we don't send out these letters without putting a lot of thought into it. And the purpose is to help these schools come off high risk or watch as soon as we can. Okay, 13. Here we go. Can you see the top? Here we go. This is the risk assessment we do. If you look up on the upper right-hand corner, is where it's scored. And this is one of those things you don't want to get a lot of points on. Most heavily weighted is your audit opinion. If you have a disclaimer or something qualified that's not related to OPEB, it's most likely that you're going to be on high risk or at a minimum on watch. Generally, a disclaimer is because your accounting records are so incomplete that they can't do an audit. So that's very often. There was 2 of them last year. The other heavily weighted thing is cash findings or negative balances or lack of cash reconciliations. Get 2 of those, you'll probably go, those are significant. Repeat findings and findings that affect your federal programs are also very serious. There are also, if I hear of, or if in the audit report there's mention of irregularities, which is a possibility of fraud or misappropriation, we'll look at those fairly seriously and at least put them on watch to help them get through that. So in conclusion on risk, if a school finds themselves in high risk or watch status, it only means that you'll get more attention. We'll try to find you the help or the assistance you need to move on. I will also pay quite a bit of attention to those schools who, for whatever reason, have an audit with multiple findings, while in prior years they had few, if any. Usually it's because of change of personnel, software, or just some event beyond their control. I will also check in with them and see how we can help, suggest a mentor through MASBO. I'd like to underline MASBO is a tremendous resource for district clerks and this, and we work pretty closely together to try to pull anybody off at high risk or if they're having problems. Next slide. This is my best practices for your responses. Some of the responses are pretty vague. I need to know who, when, what, and the actual date that it's going to be completed. I know some of you get frustrated. You write a response, get a letter from local government services saying we accepted your response, and a while later, an email from me asking you for more information. My job is to determine not what you will do, but what you actually have done. For more serious findings, I sometimes will ask for documentation, like a copy of a reconciliation or whatever is appropriate, basically auditing your response. I thank all of you for your patience when I do send you emails, and I try to call before the email goes out, because you've always been very courteous. In a year and a half, nobody's really taken me to task very too badly. So, and that brings us to the end. This is our contact information. You can contact any of us should you need any help. And that is the primary thing, is we are here to help. Our ultimate goal is you have no findings. So yeah, I hope this helps some. If you want to ever just brainstorm about internal controls, how to deal with a finding, please call me or send an email, and we'll work it out. Some of you I'll be seeing in this coming year, and that's it for me. Thank you very much.
So everybody can talk now.
Are there any questions?
This is Rebecca in Lewistown.
Hi, Rebecca.
I just have a question about knowing that most of the findings are related to student activities. Would OPI ever consider doing a training sometime, maybe, right after the school year ends or before the next one starts, or sometime in the summer for secretaries to attend? Because a lot of times there's secretaries involved that aren't just the business manager, and I don't really feel like maybe there's a good resource for everybody to kind of hear the same message and to learn from each other.
I would really be open to doing that. I'll talk to Kara, and I'm sure she will. Perhaps we can do something like this. I think because you do have secretaries doing stuff, the business manager still has to be very careful and overlook it, and I think having written out policies and procedures that they should follow is somewhat helpful. But yes, that's a good idea. We need to do that because there are so many student activities.
And I think they encounter more of the questions, the teachers, the dealing with that more directly, especially at a school our size, where I can oversee it and I can. but it's like I'm not in the trenches with them, and I think they would
Right.
appreciate it. I'm not sure if other schools also would think that, but if you could consider it, that would be great.
Yes, I will write that down. And so you think summer would be the best time?
I just feel like that's the easiest to get away from the buildings.
Okay.
But not
Yeah,
middle of the summer, because they won't be here.
Okay. No, I think that's a great idea. It's something we really have to address, and it's also kind of the weakest link. The times where there's been problems, irregularities, it's been with student activity funds. That's the only cash in the building, really. And so, yes, thank you. That's a great idea. I'll look into it right away. Anybody else?
Joanne says, I agree with Rebecca, but our secretaries don't work beyond the third week of June, so it would need to be early June for training.
Okay. Can she hear us?
Can you hear us, Joanne?
Yes, I can hear you. I just muted my phone and decided to be lazy and type. Can you hear me?
No laziness.
Hi, Joanne.
I follow that up. We've focused a lot on extracurricular. Our longtime extracurricular secretary is retiring the end of June. She started the training process for the person who will take it over for her. But I am encouraging her to revise her checklist, because the other thing that happens is that we have procedures and we have checklists, but we all know these things change, and rather than retype the whole thing or update it,
Right.
They all have to be redone. My concern too is not just secretaries, but they are the primary ones. In the buildings, it seems like we're constantly reminding people, if you have any checks that are delivered to your buildings, please get them down to our office, so that they can be credited. They're busy in their offices, I understand, but they need to understand the importance of the monetary side of things. And I don't think sometimes we do a really good job of training them as to, it's not just us being nags or us being picky about things. It's that, we have a larger responsibility.
Yes. What I'd really like to do then is perhaps contact 10 or 15 of you about what you're doing now, and then we'll have, I just got a note from Denise saying that she'll be contacting us and doing something for the summer conference. But we could put together, what works for you and get some different ideas. I'll contact 10 or 15 of you, and then we'll put together something. How does that sound? Joanne?
That would be good. I personally think that would be really good.
Because I think it's something that needs to come up from the schools up, because you're the ones on the front lines type of thing, rather than saying, there's lots of ideas, you do blind counts on the money, so on and so forth, but it's what you have with, what resources you have is the primary thing. But yeah, so we'll definitely go about that. Anything else?
This is David Pafford. I'm just curious, since I've got time on my hands and I want to get smarter on this, will MassBo have any information, or would they take my call if I just get curious about the same issues business managers do? I'm a school board chair trustee. Yeah, I'm the school board chair. So I don't, obviously I don't want to get out of my lane or past my skis, but I am curious about some of these issues with audits. Will MassBo talk to me?
Yes, they will. Actually, there's a message from Denise saying, absolutely, I will take your call at 461-3659.
3659. Okay, thank you.
Give me a call.
And the other thing, David, you can call me too. You've got my phone number and my email there. Whatever you need, You know, I mean, we're trying to assist, not, the audits are, your findings are a learning experience, really, okay?
Well, I agree. I agree.
And any way I can help you, because the schools that I've seen crash and burn have been schools where the school board are not participating, you know? So it's so important that you do. And so, like I said, it's a fantastic you're there.
Okay. Yep. You can expect to hear from me.
Okay.
So Dan, I know you and I talked about this a little bit. This is Joanne again, but
Okay.
because I had negative cash in my Fund 15 on June 30th due to due froms. So we can't have negative cash on June 30th, even though the due froms will come in and raise that. We still can't have negative cash, correct?
Right. And I have Carrie right here.
And how best to manage that with, and I understand that the standard response is those grants need to get paid out earlier. Well, that's all well and good. I'd like you to come on down here and get my administrators in gear and get that taken care of. But I apparently don't have enough gear installed in them yet, so.
I'm coming down that area sometime in February or March, so I'll swing by. That would be fun.
I mean, you know, like I say, my cash was fine, except for the fact that my due froms, of course, you know.
I understand. And, you know, Joanne, when I do the risk assessment and things like that, I do take those things into account.
Oh, I know you do. We had a good conversation about it, so I appreciate that.
And there's things beyond your control. It's like a county treasurer where they're not reconciled. You know, I mean, we have to be realistic. And the purpose isn't to see how many people I can get on high risk. It's to watch. And so, you know, with negative balances, you do your best. And I could talk to those people if you want, and we'll move on from there. That sounds.
We may have to have lunch. Anyway.
You promised me lunch. So.
I promised lunch, actually. I did. So anyway.
Okay, but yes, no, I think you and I have talked about this before, so it's.
Right. I'm not concerned about it. Well, I am, but you know, I'm worried about it, I guess is the correct phraseology.
Oh.
But I struggle. I do struggle because they're busy. And so oftentimes you don't get a chance to take a breath and really get things under control until that late spring window. And all of a sudden then you're running up against the barrier of year end.
Yes. Yes. No, I understand. You don't.
And you know, I know there are methods of balancing that out and you know everything, and I'm trying to have more control over that end of things, but it is difficult to get some of those things taken care of. So.
Yeah. And you know, the purpose is we just keep getting better, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Is there anyone else out there?
When you've got your schedule of your travel plans in place.
I will let you know. I was actually taking a few days of vacation, but it will be in February. I'm going to start, and I will let you know definitely. Okay. See if we can't get that fixed. Is there anybody else that'd like to say anything? Okay. Well, thank you all very much. And you have our contact information on the screen. If you have any other questions that come up later, please give us a call or an email. And I really appreciate all the participation. Thank you.
Thank you.